go head to head, you and I.
Yes. We'll just we are live as live can get on a election day. Not really an election day. It's just some mayor races around the country and a few things. It's not like it's the midterms. We have got IQ Rizzoli with us today. So IQ, you mentioned to me before we got on the air we have a lot to talk about. So where do we want to start here?
On Zahran Mamdani. Zohran Mamdani is a Muslim. And the biggest mistake Cuomo made, he talked to him about him as a communist. He is not a communist. You can't be a Muslim and a communist. Why? Islam is a monotheistic religion. Communism does not believe in a God. Islam is 100% committed to a God called Allah. So to call him a communist was a waste of time. He should have concentrated on him as a Muslim. Now, as a Muslim, Zohran is a Sharia compliant Muslim, which means he follows the Quran 100%. When he follows the Quran 100%, what does it mean? According to the Quran, every Muslim who is Sharia compliant can never integrate, can never assimilate, and can never be loyal citizens among people who are not Muslim, called kuffar. So, Zohran Mamdani is a Sharia compliant Muslim, the mortal and eternal enemy of every single American who's not a Muslim. And I'm willing to wager, personally, $200,000 for anybody who can prove me wrong. There you go. On your show, in public, I'm willing to wager $200,000 that there isn't a single human being on planet Earth, nor any intelligent life outside the solar system, who can debate me these subjects and wins. What more can I tell you? As Charlie Cook used to say, prove me wrong.
We have got a great guest with us today, Mr. IQ Rizzoli with us. And so IQ, besides all the Mamdani news, what else do you have for us?
Well, I'll tell you why it's so important. It's like an election day, because New York City, by voting him in, has just committed suicide. He keeps telling to the New Yorkers, free this, free travel, free food. You don't increase the rents. Everything which is free will never be free. There is nothing free in this universe. You know, Einstein's theory of relativity says matter goes to energy and energy goes to matter. Not an ounce of energy is lost, not an ounce of energy is gained. Which means, in this case, you can't have free. Something will have to be paid for. And who's going to pay for it? Where is he going to get the billions of dollars of free items that he is going to support? In the end, the men and women who voted for him will have to pay for it. Why? Because corporate America, the rich people in New York, will pack up and go to Texas, they will go to Florida, they'll go anywhere else, but they will not stay in New York. Tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, does it sound logical to you? I always deal with logic, or try to anyway.
So IQ, what other topics here do you have for us?
Well, we have the threat that Trump made to Nigeria. Do you know anything about it?
Fill us in for those who haven't.
Okay. For the last 10 years at least, over 70,000 Christian blacks were slaughtered by Muslims in Nigeria. And for the last 10 years, not a single Christian country, not a single Christian leader, not a single church leader, not a single politician raised any point accusing them of genocide until Donald Trump. And Donald Trump now gave a warning to Nigerian government. Unless you stop it, I'm coming down on you with guns blazing. And they should know he means it. He ordered the War Department to prepare contingency plans. You know, what I love about Trump is he does exactly what he says. You cross my red line, I screw you. End of conversation. That's it. He will do it. In fact, he even warned them he will put in land, boots on the ground. It's not a joke. He's not talking about air attacks. He's talking about boots on the ground. Yeah, it's serious. It is genocide. It is Islam. And nobody mentions it, especially in media. Again and again and again, Islam, I said it before, I'll keep repeating it till the day I die, is the foremost danger to humanity in the 21st century. Not Russia, not China, not communism, Islam. Again, $200,000 says nobody will be able to challenge me and win.
Fantastic. Fantastic. We have got a great guest with us today, IQ Al Rassooli. So what else do you have for us, IQ? Because you got a lot on your mind, my man.
I have, because Donald Trump is working maybe 15 items at the same time. And they call him stupid. Can you believe that? The Democrats call him stupid. He single-handedly created a movement called the Republican Party, but really it's not a Republican Party. It's the Trump MAGA Party. And they call him stupid. He won the elections, left, right, and center, and they call him stupid. The only reason they call him stupid is because it's a reflection of themselves. They are the ones who are stupid. They lost, and they can't take it. And you know, I love about him, he provokes them with jokes and memes, and they freak out because they are really stupid. They are unhappy people. They are miserable people. They hate America. They hate themselves. They hate the Constitution. They hate liberty. Well, I wish them death, okay? Nancy Pelosi wished Donald Trump death. I wish death upon her too. I mean it too. I mean it. I wish somebody would put a bullet in her head. Sue me.
So what?
Another item.
Give us more on this, my friend.
No, listen. He went to East Asia. He went to Malaysia. He went to Indonesia. He went to Japan and South Korea. He was treated more like a king, a monarch, than a president of the United States of America. And they all liked him. And he was dancing with the Malaysians. Amazing. He was doing the Trump dance while they were dancing themselves. He is relatable. He is the most relatable political entity in the 21st century of America. That's why they love him. And, you know, when you read the polls, and they are all Democratic polls, they have always been wrong. They will always be wrong because they're always biased. His popularity in his second, you know, after 10 months is more now than it was 9 months ago. And in spite of the shut of the government. And why is the government shut? It's because of the Democrats. Hi, we have Dan Perkins.
We do have Dan Perkins, just in time here. So, so IQ, I know.
You've got to go to Dan now.
Well, Dan,
Yes.
IQ's been tossing out all sorts of ideas and all sorts of things going on here.
Yes.
I was discussing Zohran Mandani. I was discussing the Nigerian genocide, and I was
Yes.
discussing Trump's visit to South Asia. What do you
Yes.
think?
Well, any early voting or polls or any early voting results on the New York primary or the election? Is he
No,
winning or do we know?
all I said, they are committing suicide. New York people are committing suicide, and I hope within 2 years they will definitely realize what a huge mistake they have made. Yeah,
Well,
karma is always good.
I I the most recent article that I read, IQ, was that the coalition that was put together to get him the nomination for the Democratic Party was Soros, the imams, and a bunch of splinter groups. But Soros's
And
money,
Care was with them.
I
Soros
understand
and
that,
Care.
but the fact that the imams in the city were actively involved in the political process
Of course,
uh,
of
uh,
course.
creates a situation where um, there. Donald Trump said over the weekend that if he's elected, this guy's elected mayor, he's going to cut off his aid from the federal government. And he could probably do that. And he'll wind up being sued by the city of New York, and he'll go to the courts. But all the time, it's going to tie up Donnie. But I think that the polling data has him as such a historical lead that no other mayor candidate has ever had. I'm finding it hard to believe, and I could be absolutely wrong. As it relates to the Christians, Donald Trump spoke over the weekend quite strongly about his disdain for the murder of the Christians, and may in fact do something physically about it. He didn't say what, but it's on his radar, which is you've been trying to get him on his radar for a long time on this particular issue. And I think that the world needs to take a look at what's going on in that part of the world as it relates to Muslims and Christians. And what I don't know, and maybe you could give us an insight, IQ, is what's happening in other countries where there has been historically a decent size Christian population. Are they experiencing the same thing that's happening in Africa? Do you know?
Yes, in Angola, they are murdering them. In the Republic of Congo, they're murdering them. Wherever Islam exists, they murder Christians. Americans have got to understand. In fact, not Americans. Christians have got to understand. Modern Christians are stupid. The Christians of 300 years ago, 200 years ago understood 100% the existential threat of Islam to Christianity. The modern Christians think they can coexist. You cannot ever coexist with Islam.
Right.
Not Christians, not Jews, not Buddhists, not Hindus, not anybody. In fact, Muslims cannot coexist with other Muslims. And unless you get this through your thick head, I mean, talking about the Christians, you're lost the game. You're losing it in Europe, and you can lose it in America.
But what you're saying has merit, but I think there has to be there has to be, and I think I have at least one possible answer. There has to be a reason why the Christians of today are not like the Christians of 300 years ago. And I think the difference is And I want to explain it in an example that I heard over the weekend, which really just kind of blew me away. And the analogy that the person was making was, how is it that 25% of the Jews, supposedly 25% of the Jews in New York City, are favoring Mandavi? And the person said, this was a Jewish woman who said this comment, a reporter, on Outkick and on Clay and Buck's podcast network. She said, because many of those peoples who call themselves Jews, they call themselves Jews because they eat bagels and cream cheese. There is no fundamental religious or philosophical reason for them to be calling themselves Jews, but they think because they eat bagels and cream cheese and lox that they're Jewish, and so when they decide that we need a communist mayor for New York who's anti-Jewish, they have a different frame of mind because they really don't have a religion IQ. And there are many Christians in the United States, whether they be Catholics or Protestants, doesn't make any difference, who are Christian in name only. They don't practice a religion. They don't practice a philosophy. Now, there are a lot of Catholics that do, but my point is that what's changed is that the people today who belong to certain religions have a totally different perspective of what it means to be a Jew or a Christian or a Catholic or whatever. I mean, I'm a Catholic, and we have situations in our own religion where we have people who are claim to be Christians but don't practice a religion, whether it's Catholicism or Baptists or Episcopals. Doesn't make a difference. They don't practice a religion. We got millions of young people in this country, young adults, who have no religious moral foundation IQ, but yet they call themselves Christians. So it is the erosion of the power of the church over centuries as a secular government took over, where in the past religious leaders had tremendous power over the governments and the country, much like the Ayatollahs have in Iran. I mean, I'm not saying that they're the same kind, but the Ayatollahs and the imams in Iran govern the country. They are the government and their religion. And in historical times, that was true of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church ruled the world as emperors, and at the same time had religious convictions. So I think the problem is not a new problem. It's a problem with the realization that we have millions and millions of people. It's just like, and I know you're going to scream at me for saying this, but that's all right. You're allowed to do that. We have a lot of Muslims who are Muslims in name only too. They're not really practicing.
Yeah, but these are a minority. This is the tragedy. Muslim in name only are less than 1%. Christians in name only are 30 to 40%. Jews
Right.
in name only are 70%.
Right. And so I'm saying is that the whole religious structure, and that's why it's fascinating as an observer to see what's happening in America with the younger generation who are swarming back to churches. They finally realize that they have no fundamental value system. And when you have the things that have gone on in our country, when you look at James Comey and you look at Brenner and Clapper and Obama and Hillary and Bill and all these people, There is no moral compass there, none whatsoever. And there are centers of influence that are influencing children and young adults to a particular philosophy. One of the, and I haven't said this in a long time, but I used to say it a lot. One of the greatest problems that we in America have been suffering through and by generations is when Bill Clinton had relations with Monica Lewinsky, and he went before the American people, stood at the podium, shook his finger at us and said, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, and I'm going back to work for the American people. That created a situation that freed up in a lot of young people's minds. It's all right to have sexual relations. It's all right. There's no moral equivalency. There's no moral problem. It's okay. And so that the whole demeanor of the country was influenced. And as I've talked many times, there are situations where one person can make a difference, good or bad. Obama was the guy who had the message of his campaign, and the American people bought his campaign, and he never really delivered on his campaign promises. But that didn't really matter. It's just they bought his message. We have the same situation with Donald Trump. Make America great again. Make America great was his first mantra, and make it again is the second. But now we have a totally different group of people who were influenced by the arrogance and the lack of values and moral turpitude of the people who are in the Biden administration, who tried to destroy this country and its moral character. How can you call yourself a Christian or a practicing Catholic and try and go to church if you're in favor of abortion? You can't. But he tried to convince the American people and young Catholics and everybody else. I mean,
Act of violence.
Yeah, but
Good
Pelosi
Lord.
did the same thing. In fact, Pelosi is the worst of all of them. Pelosi is the worst of all of them. First, she says she's Catholic, but she's opposed abortion.
mm-hmm.
She says she's pro-Constitution, and she undermines the Constitution. She should be dead.
Well, some people think she might already be, but that's another story.
That is awesome. That is awesome. We have got Dan Perkins, of course, our good close personal longtime friend, Mr. IQ Rizzoli, is with us as well today. And we have a great guest joining us here in our program. Mandy, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. It's good to be with you.
So I know that I am going to butcher your last name. Is it Gunasekara?
That's really close. Gunasekara.
There we go. Jiggy Jaguar, the ugly American strikes again. And we have got a great guest with us today. So Mandy, talk to us a little bit about your latest project. And I know that the fellas and me are going to have some questions for you.
Yeah, well, one of my latest projects is I recently put a book out called Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp. And I actually put this out right before President Trump was reelected, but we've been staying on the horn because it's very germane to first what the Department of Government Efficiency was doing in terms of shining a light on the extent of waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal government. And then now, fast forward to today, where we're in this extended, prolonged Democrat shutdown, and the president has additional opportunities to shrink the size and scope of the federal government, shutting down particular offices that lose funding, and urging those that are in non-essential positions, giving them additional off ramps or firing them and letting them go because they are no longer essential to the actual functioning of the federal government and the agency or administration that they are serving within. So that's my latest book. There's 3 parts to it. The first aspect is my experience with the deep state, which is as crazy as they put me up in a sex hotel when I went to Germany to negotiate a better deal for the president after he got out of the Paris Climate Accord. The State Department tried to undermine the work that we were doing and went so far as to put me in a sex hotel 45 minutes away from where the actual negotiations were occurring. That's kind of the first anecdotal portion of the book. The second is, how did we get to a point where the unelected bureaucrat had more sway in our system than the individual American citizen, despite the best efforts of our founders and the design of our constitutional republic? And then the last part is what I referenced just a little bit ago. It was, what do we do about it? And the good news is, a lot of those policy ideas and proposals have been embraced first by Doge and then by the various cabinet secretaries and administrators in charge of the various agencies.
So Dan, jump in there, my friend. I know you've got some questions.
Too many. Is it Mandy? Is her first name? Is that correct?
Yes.
Mandy, let me ask you a question. Do you find it interesting that we don't hear anything from Doge anymore? Are they still doing their job?
Yeah, they are. And you're right in the sense that we don't hear about them publicly, especially as when they first came onto the scene. And it seemed like every few hours there was some breathless headline or pearl clutching from the left about how Doge was doing something crazy that was going to undermine the ability of the federal government to continue to deliver actual services that American citizens relied upon. That didn't necessarily prove true. So from a media perspective or media interest, the work of Doge has fallen behind the scenes, as has the fact that you don't have Elon Musk there anymore. And what you have is the team of people that he brought on board, the Doge lieutenants, if you will, that are stationed at just about each of the agencies and are working all the time with the various cabinet heads at the agencies. At EPA, I'm more familiar with the work that they do there. It's Administrator Lee Zeldin and his team. There is still a Doge representative that is constantly working with them and coming up with ways to further reduce the size and scope of that agency and ensure that those reductions don't undermine what the agency's supposed to do, but does do a lot in terms of doing away with political offices or duplicative offices or wasteful offices that have been put in place over time to do what Doge said that they would ultimately do.
Would you subscribe to a business philosophy of the way public corporations have to report their results? They have to report income and expenses on a quarterly basis, and then they make an annual report. Are you tie enough into the administration that you might be able to suggest to one of your contacts that you've heard from people that those just looks like they've disappeared from the headlines and people are wondering if they're still there? Could we create a philosophy that says we're going to do a quarterly report of what's happened over the last 90 days and then an annual report of what did they do in the last 12 months, so that it doesn't have to be every day like Elon, but there has to be an ability to get out information to the American people that these people are still working and what they're doing.
Yeah, I do think that there's definitely a need for more clarity on what Doge is doing. Now, some of this is strategic. Doge being behind the scenes means that they can focus on actually doing the work instead of putting out fires from a media perspective, or having to siphon away resources from digging into the various budgets and the overlays of various actions and offices designed to prevent anyone from coming in and figuring out what is it exactly that this office does and how does it exactly contribute to whatever agency you're looking at, their relative mission. So there is a strategy to it, but I do agree with you in the sense that the American people, I don't think they would ever grow tired of DOJ reporting out, whether it's a quarterly, a mid-year or annual report of what exactly they have been doing and how they've been saving the American people and the American taxpayer dollars in the ways that they promised to do. Now, I will say next year, there is supposed to be the deadline or whatnot of DOJ. There's supposed to be a big report out on that. And in the meantime, again, like I said, I'm most familiar with EPA. They have been publishing a lot of their work that they've been doing. They aren't necessarily attributing it to DOJ, even though it does have DOJ's fingerprints all over it. What I'm thinking about at EPA is that they have been getting rid of what were characterized as environmental justice federal advisory boards. This happened very, very recently, and these were political boards put in place with, under the guise of doing some good work for marginalized communities, when they actually didn't do anything along those lines. They just created political opportunities or laundered taxpayer money, handing it out to political groups via the grants process. EPA has been in the process of doing that. That really started with DOJ's work and still has DOJ fingerprints on it, but it is EPA that is rightfully claiming the finalization of this various action. So it's a long-winded way to say, yeah, I do think there's benefit to DOJ being clear about what they're doing. If you're watching what the agencies are doing right now, DOJ's fingerprints are on a lot of the restructuring and the improving of efficiency initiatives that the cabinet secretaries and leaders have been taking on. So it is there, but for it to be clear, I do think that there would be more clarity on that front would be good for everybody.
One of the things that I have seen in my 80-some years of life is that Americans easily forget something if they don't hear about it. And so when we don't talk about something, it falls out of our gray matter in our brain and it has to be recharged. And I think this whole the communication section, which we just talked about, understanding that Americans are shareholders in this enterprise called the United States of America, and we need to have a structure that allows them to communicate. But let me move on. I'm going to ask you a question, and this is a question that I have raised almost every week on Jim's show and every show that I either produce for my own or appear on. The Office of Management and Budget says there's about 2.2 million federal civil employees. And of that, 34% are classified, that's 750,000 government employees, as non-essential employees. Why do we have them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that's where the Trump administration has been starting in terms of issuing additional RIFs or letting various roles go and shutting down affiliated offices. That this was my question back when I was serving as chief of staff during the first Trump administration. Why do we continue to support roles that on its face, it's defined as non-essential? Why do we continue to give the people who fill these roles full-time employment, guaranteed benefits? And when I was there, it was even more frustration because it was in the midst of COVID, where I was commuting from my hometown in Decatur, Mississippi, up to Washington, D.C., and you had people whose livelihoods that had been totally destroyed that wanted to work. And then I was being met by an entitled bureaucracy that, that they felt entitled to have their benefits and their salary without I'm sorry, I've got my daughter right here and she's crying. I'm going to take a second just to put a pacifier in her mouth. But
Hey,
nonetheless,
that's fine. That's fine.
yeah,
You're good. We have got a great guest with us today. Mandy joins us here in our big broadcast. Dan Perkins is with us as well from Dan Perkins Media IQ. Al Rizzoli, who by the way, if you ever read our videos or read the comments on our videos on BitChute, when I post an IQ Al Rizzoli video, they're wild. And also, I think a lot of people don't actually watch the video They just like making nasty comments about IQ. But Mandy is with us today. So speaking of IQ, Al Rizzoli, IQ, do you have any questions here for Mandy while we have her? IQ, unmute, please, if you can.
As usual, I forgot that.
You have any questions here for Mandy?
Well, Mandy's. Oh, wow. Wow. Look at that.
Hey, we've had babies on this show. We've had cats on this show.
Well, show us the baby, for
We've
God's
had
sake. Show us
dogs
the
on this
baby.
show. Everybody bring everybody. We don't care. But IQ, you've got some questions
Yeah.
for Mandy.
Mandy, it should be made regular that American people find out how many jobs have been closed and how much money was saved. It's got to be at least on a monthly basis, not weekly, not daily, at least on a monthly basis. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think to Dan's point, it was a very important point that the American people do have short memories and they forget. If they aren't constantly reminded about the good work that's being done often and in their face, then they will forget about it. And the media
That's
is
why,
really,
that's why
really good at
monthly
distracting them.
is a very good idea. I mean, it's not far, not a huge period of time. Every month, same time, same dates. They tune in and they get all the information, the up-to-date information. We saved how much? $10 billion by closing this one, 20,000 people out of a job, and so on and so forth. I think people will be very happy to hear it.
Yeah, I agree. And I know I haven't been on their website in a while. There is a website that folks can visit if they want to do a little bit of sleuthing on their own. But I agree, there should be a segment designated on one of the mainstream TV shows, network shows, especially now that you have some of the networks that are being bought by folks who more align with the America First vision of the country, designated to talking about what's going on at Doge. I think it would be popular, and I think the American people would appreciate it, and it'd be good from a governance perspective as well.
But the White House can do that, by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
Donald Trump is using now X and other stuff enormously effectively. The White House can, on a monthly basis, produce all this information. It's not a problem.
Yeah,
I have no other
agree with
questions.
that.
No, I mean, what you're doing is, this is exactly what we need to do. Cut waste. They spent 10 years to undermine America. 10 years. In fact, started with Obama. That's more than 10 years.
So, Manny, let me go on to another subject following IQ's what he's done. I agree that we need better communications. We need to understand how much money we're saving and not spending. We gotta, but the question I would throw at you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. How good a job are we doing destroying the deep state?
I think we're doing as good of a job as is possible, really. I mean, you needed someone like President Trump who has a backbone, not only a backbone, but a plan to rein in the deep state. We knew, and I say we, I'm referring to colleagues that I worked with at Project 2025 and other conservative nonprofit groups that were thinking strategically about the next opportunity for a conservative president to address the deep state. There was no one better motivated than President Trump, especially after the deep state tried to put him behind bars and take away his ability to run for office and destroy his businesses and his family's well-being in the process. We had the motivation, and then you had groups of us who were thinking through the policy decisions you could make, the legal implications, and he started deploying those on day one. So we're on a good track. We knew that the left was going to challenge every single move. So some of this has been tied up in litigation. But to date, we've gotten mostly favorable decisions on the litigation front as well. And so there's a lot more work to be done. I mean, one of the policies I proposed that has yet to be fully embraced, I think it will be, is moving some of the main DC based offices out of DC and moving them to various other parts of the country. But short of things like that, I mean, they're doing the best that they can. It's a huge problem. You have to think about it like this. I mean, the deep state has been growing essentially unchecked for decades. And it really goes back to some decisions like the passage of the 16th and the 17th Amendments, where you started shifting resources away from the states towards Washington, D.C. You know, it's been, the problem has been festering for a very, very long time. So I like to think of it as the ship was headed in the wrong direction. We have now shifted that ship on a better course, and now we have to go piece by piece and figure out how to really to get rid of a lot of that ship and rebuild it much more efficiently.
Do we have a problem still that we got challenges in a different way? One of the things that happened recently, which I'm very concerned about, is 2 federal district court judges, 2 last week, ordered Donald Trump and the administration to spend the emergency reserve to fund the SNAP program. Now, we have 3 branches of government: the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. And there's supposed to be a balance of power between the 3. But we now have a situation where district courts have ordered the president to spend money to fund the program when the government is closed and the staff people are not working because they're not getting paid. My question then is, we're in a situation where, I know this is going to sound like a big reach, but it could be, those challenges that were put into the 2 district judges came from the Democratic Party. What if, or is it possible, taking the same concept, that Republicans go after and request that the court order the Democrats to come back to the table and pass the omnibus bill?
I don't think that they could be ordered back. I mean, my take on the shutdown situation is that after today, election day, we're gonna see things shake out. There has, as I was talking with one friend earlier today, there's been a vibe shift in DC that hasn't really been felt outside of the folks who are the closest in terms of trying to negotiate a path out of the shutdown. And so there's been a vibe shift that should come to some sort of action early next week, is what folks ultimately say. But to your question, it's just a general exercise. I don't know that you could have you know, the courts order back in the Democrats to deal with the issue. You know, I just don't know that would fundamentally work out.
But if the court orders the administration to pay the SNAP payments and to spend the money that is in the reserves, the court is effectively doing that. Now, it's going to be challenged. But
Yeah.
my point is that the Democrats have taken their activity to a new level, and that is to try and get the courts to run the government. It's different when they're challenging whether or not we can put people in a prison or send them out of the country. We're now talking about taking away the power of the administrative branch to administer the laws and the government. And the court's telling them that they have to do that, and I know it's a little far fetched, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility. The other thing is I'm concerned that the Republican Party is underestimating the magnitude, not of what's happening in New York and Seattle, but what's happening in many other cities and community across the country where communists are gaining power.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I'm concerned. Well, I'm not concerned. I think this is the strategy of the left. If they are successful in those areas, that's going to be the template by which they go after the midterms and then they approach the presidential election. They don't care if the inmates are ruling the asylum so long as they're winning. And that's what you've seen in the Democrat Party is they often and almost always, very often, prioritize control over anything else, even if it's to the detriment of this country, as we've seen with their treatment of illegal aliens, letting them in to the detriment of American citizens. That's just one example. I wouldn't be surprised if they're willing to. They've already sold their soul to the communist socialist devil. If they can ride that to some version of victory in the midterms and in the presidential election, they're going to do that.
So let's you said just a moment ago that things will change. The narrative might change after the two major elections in Virginia and New York, and the California ballot to change redistricting. What if we lose all three?
If we lose all three races, the ones that you just referenced.
Yeah, if we lose New York, Virginia, and the initiative to redistrict to take seats away from the Democrats to deal with Texas, do the Democrats in Congress become more emboldened to stay out? Or on the other hand, if they lose all of them, will they be more interested in capitulating and trying to come back? I'm trying to look at what the ramifications are of the outcome of these three elections.
Well, I think what will shift is that they won't be looking at as keenly through a political eye. I think they'll be looking at it from the true governance side and the fact that you have, like the largest government union, AFGE, is putting pressure on Democrats to come to some sort of resolution. That type of pressure from key constituent groups to the Democrat Party and the left, they have been coming out and putting pressure on top of pressure for them to find a negotiated way out. And so I think after the election, they're going to shift away from, sticking with and being entrenched for these various relative to these various opportunities that you just laid out in California, New York, and Virginia. And then they'll shift back towards having to deal with the bigger problem at hand, which is the fact that key constituent groups are, they're not getting paid, whether it's SNAP beneficiaries or whether it is the federal workforce. And they have various representatives of those groups that are putting pressure on them to find a way out.
Yeah. Do you, so that, or whether you saw it today or not, but this morning there was a release from Charlemagne de God, and he basically said to the Democratic Party, "Come back, you've lost, and you're hurting the American people."
Yeah, and I think that will continue to pile up. I think some of those groups have been, or some of those types of figures have been a little bit subdued, but because of the election, respective of the election. But after the election, they're gonna come out and even be even stronger and more direct in pressuring the Democrats to figure it out.
Terrific.
So while we have about 10 minutes left here with you, my friend, let's talk a little bit about your book. Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, you wouldn't believe the things that I went through. And my husband was on the receiving end of me coming home from work and just being like, you wouldn't believe what just happened today or the situation we were in. And so after a couple of years of that, he said, I think you should write a book. And the other piece of it is I had a lot of frustration. I mean, going in and working as a political appointee, especially for the Trump administration, it is a very, very difficult job. And so I just wanted to turn that frustration into something constructive. And the best idea we came up with was to write a book at my husband's urging. And so thinking through better defining the deep state and how they operate, not just at the top of the political status, but all the way through the ranks. Someone like myself that served in various roles within the agency, all the way down to folks that I characterized as our young guns. These are kids that are fresh out of college that get an important but an administrative job within the agency. You had the deep state going after them, which is the first of its kind in an administration where they were going after the young guns of the Trump administration. So I just wanted to better define that, because I do think that some of those roles may be more relatable for people to understand. And they hear the president say, if they're going after me, they're going to go after you. But I just wanted to paint that picture a little bit clearer and show them they are, in fact, going after someone just like you, or someone who would be considered even more junior to you just because they deign to work for somebody like President Trump. So that's a long-winded way of saying my husband's urging, and then I had a lot of pent-up frustration and wanted to turn it into something constructive and entertaining and informative, which is ultimately what the book ended up as.
That's awesome. So Dan, do you have any questions for Mandy about her book here?
Yeah. So when you wrote the book, how much time did you spend, and were you still working with Trump while you were trying to write the book?
No, this was after. I probably first came up with the outline. It was early 2021 when I just started putting a little bit of pen to paper. And it took me a while. I mean, it took me, I would say, 2 years of thinking through an outline, coming up with anecdotes, and then ultimately putting pen to paper and then pitching it to, the publishing houses, ultimately landing with Skyhorse. But yeah, it was a multi-year effort.
Now, are you involved with the administration at all now?
Not directly, I'm not. I have a consulting practice, so I represent various groups that mostly have issues at EPA. But I have a lot of my closest friends that are working in the administration. I stay in touch with them and help them out in various ways, whether it's being a cheerleader in the media or being a shoulder to cry on behind the scenes. That's how I've kind of found my place in this administration.
So are you thinking about a second book?
I have, I think a follow-up would be really interesting, especially since things have turned out better than I ever really thought that they could. Given the way that Doge started, it was overwhelmingly successful. So yeah, I've put some thought into it. I haven't put any pen to paper. I haven't done any of the hard work yet.
Okay. All right. That's fine. That's fine. So, what's the biggest challenge you see for the administration going on through the rest of this year and for the rest of Trump's term?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the media, some of the mainstream media, they still have an outsized influence, and I think that it's been curbed in a lot of ways. But I think convincing the middle of the road Americans, the ones that are ultimately going to matter going into the midterms, that what they've been doing is it's worth waiting for, whether it's on the trade front, whether it's on the deportation front, and I think they've already seen a lot of benefits. But some of these are it requires long-term outcomes. And so I think it's having to constantly deal with a mainstream media that is dead set against the president. It continues to be a challenge, and something that they'll continue to have to work through.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
You have been amazing, Mandy. Before we let you go, how do we get in touch with you on social media, buy your book, everything?
The best way to follow me is on X at Mississippi MD, or you can follow me on Truth at Mandy.Gunasekara.
Fantastic. So Dan, bring us up to speed on all your projects, my friend.
Well, I have a new one. I have a new one. I was so enthralled with the sheriff 2 weeks ago. We decided to write a book together, and we're in the process of, as Mandy was talking about, figuring out the notes and what we want to talk about in the book. But we're in the process of, we've had 2 meetings, and we're going to have another one on Friday, and we're working on subject matter, and I'm excited, and we're going to try and have it come out by the end of the first quarter, so it'll be around for the midterm election. Of course, my books are available at Amazon, and you can listen to the radio shows at amfm247.com, and TV shows are on Rumble and Your News.
Fantastic. So IQ, wrap us up here, my friend. How do we get your columns, your books, everything?
My books are on Amazon, Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam. It's a trilogy. And all my articles and talk shows, other than James's, are with America Out Loud. It is pleasure again, as usual, with Dan and you. And she was a remarkable lady.
Yes.
Thank God she's a Trump supporter.
Well, Dan, I will talk to you next Tuesday. IQ, I'll talk to you on
Take care.
Thursday. And thanks to